Who are you fetching for? I heard about a pastor out on the West Coast who started his message for the day in a fairly creative way. He brought a beautiful Irish setter up on stage with him. The Irish setter's name was Josh, and the dog belonged to the student pastor of the church. The student pastor was single, and he and this dog were very close. So this pastor on this Sunday morning took a ball while the dog was on stage, and he just rolled the ball across the stage, and he said, "Fetch, Josh, fetch." But the dog didn't budge and wouldn't respond to the authority of a religious leader. And then the pastor brought up from the congregation this muscle-bound man. He was a local bodybuilder, and the man leaned down to the dog and he growled at the dog and he said, "Josh, go get the ball." And Josh just stayed there, and the dog would not respond to power. And then the pastor brought a very well-dressed man from the audience, and it was a local banker, a very distinguished looking man, and the man took out his wallet and he waved a stack of bills in front of the dog's face, and he said, "Josh, go get the ball." But the dog didn't respond and didn't give in to the pull or the desire for money. And then the pastor said, "Well, let's all put some pressure on Josh." And they began to chant in unison, "Fetch, Josh, fetch. Fetch, Josh, fetch." And the dog just sat there and did not respond to the appeal of a crowd. And then the pastor brought up on stage this very attractive woman, very nicely dressed, and had this long auburn hair, about the color of the dog's hair, as a matter of fact. And she leaned down and she whispered in the dog's ear, and as she patted him on the head, and she said, "Josh, would you go and get the ball for me, please?" Now at that point, the pastor said he did notice the dog flinch just a bit, but he stayed where he was and didn't respond to seduction. And then the student pastor came up on the stage, the owner of the dog, and all he did was say, "Josh, go get the ball." And the dog bolted across the stage and retrieved the ball for his master. And when the commotion had died down in the sanctuary, the pastor looked at his people and he asked them a question. He said, "Who are you fetching for?" I believe that's a real good question that any follower of Jesus should ask himself or herself every single day. Who are we fetching for? Because Jesus said you can only have one master, only one. You can't serve more than one. By definition, there will only be one that ultimately and absolutely we fetch for. Think about it. It doesn't matter whether it's at our home. I mean, are we trying to please our children or even our spouse or our parents? No, ultimately, we serve an audience of one. Think of how that would affect us in the workplace. Anybody that's watching this, whether you're an employer or an employee, you could be the CEO of your company or chairman of the board. You might even think that no one tells you what to do or no one calls the shots for you. But that's not true if you claim to be a follower of Jesus. I know that it's not possible to always please people, because not even God himself can please everybody. So he doesn't even try. I mean, he's the master, right? He's the one ultimately that we should all fetch for. Think about even in the Old Testament where the Hebrew people are being delivered out of Egyptian bondage, and the whole way their journey's characterized by grumbling and complaining. And God doesn't mince any words in saying how much he hates that grumbling and complaining, because really it's a manifestation of a lack of faith that he's going to provide and that he's going to supply everything that we need, and even much in reality of what we want. So who are you fetching for? Now you may say, "Well, you don't understand, because I've got these people in my life and I have to make them happy." Well, I get it. I get it. But the Apostle Paul said in the book of Colossians, to do your work with all your heart. He said, do your work heartily with great diligence as unto the Lord. He said, because it's the Lord God whom you serve. Now, when he said that, he was talking to slaves, to servants, because that was true in their culture. But how much more would it apply to those of us that do human work, earthly work? So we realize that we might have some constituents or some board members or an employer or a boss that we need to please in order to keep our job. But ultimately, if it ever comes down to a choice, we should remember that we fetch only for one master. If you would like to know about someone in the business world who put this principle of fetching for the right person into practice, it would be Truett Cathy, the founder of the Chick-fil-A organization. Now, I know that they didn't invent the chicken, just the chicken sandwich, right? But they've gotten so much scrutiny and even criticism and second guessing about whether or not they should be open on Sundays. But they made a decision early on as an organization that they would not open franchises unless the ownership agreed not to open on Sundays. So early on, Truett Cathy at least set as a core value of the organization that he founded that they would honor that first day of the week on the Lord's Day as a time of worship for individuals and for family members. So in a sense, he decided who he was fetching for very early on. So see, it's possible. And if you've ever tried to go through a drive-through around lunchtime, you know that conviction not to open their stores on Sunday has not hurt their business one bit. There have been occasions, not often, but there have been occasions where they've decided to open up their doors on Sundays. And those occasions have been to help people who are in need and often give away food to hurricane victims or victims of natural disasters. Now, why would they do such a thing? Well, for the same reason that they chose to close their doors early on in their restaurants, because they decided a long time ago who they were fetching for. I just thought I'd throw that example in as a real life example of somebody who gets this principle. Thanks for watching. See you next time.